again, welcome. A little bit about our program. If you were here last week, you heard me talk about say a few things about the program, but this is an absolutely spectacular place, and the biggest reason why are the people. And this is just a small cross-section of the absolutely incredible individuals with whom you could interact with in getting your training here. And so on all levels, especially the residents, but faculty, fellows, staff, this is just an absolutely amazing place. And it's in an amazing setting. We're one of the best hospitals in the country, one of the best medical schools in the country, and you can understand putting that together why we're one of the best training programs in the country for general surgery. But St. Louis is an incredibly livable, affordable city, and hopefully you had a chance to, if you weren't able to participate last week, to be able to watch that session. And that webinar was recorded and is available on our website to hear more about the residents and their experiences here in St. Louis. So I hope you have a chance to see that. We have an incredible mentorship and support system here where once you match, you're assigned to a resident family. The residents actually designated it as such, and make sure that you've got great residents and faculty support until you transition into your research or professional development time, which time you really get deeper mentorship experiences with the faculty with whom you work during the lab to help you then transition into the next stage of your academic careers in the future. The residents are actively participating in running this program and help to take incredible steps to make sure that we're constantly improving the program. So we're not ones to rest on our laurels. We know this is a great place, but we always want to try to make it better. And having the resident input in that is critical. We have an amazing training program, not just in the operating room to work with these great individuals, but in the simulation lab as well. And we have an amazing simulation lab and the opportunity to be able to work there every week, both animate as well as cadaveric, high fidelity and low fidelity systems are available to the residents, and the opportunity to be able to get your training in the lab before you go to the operating room, including an amazing robotic simulation area now with multiple robotic simulators. But the resources there that Dr. Eberlein and the leadership have provided have allowed for a spectacular simulation experience and one of the oldest and I would say most refined simulation experiences in general surgery residency in the country. The research here, we're going to talk about that a lot in the coming, the next session that we have, the third of our 3 sessions on September 24th. And a number of these individuals will be coming back to talk about their research experiences and the research opportunities here. But to say that you can have a spectacular research experience and parlay that into an amazing academic career is an understatement. Pretty much anything you want to do from a research perspective, you can do here, from basic science all the way to population health sciences and beyond. And the creativity that the residents have come up with and the faculty in doing some amazing things is limitless. And so that is definitely a feather in the cap. But what we're going to talk about this evening is flexibility, and the clinical experience here, both the depth and breadth, is shown here in these amazing individuals who have come together tonight to answer questions about that. But we have an amazing history related to flexibility and early specialization. And so I want to take the opportunity to actually introduce Dr. Klingensmith. She's one of the past chairs of the American Board of Surgery and one of my predecessors, and let her say a few words about flexibility and training and the history here. I'm going to put a couple things in the chat, which are some links to information both on our website, as well as some literature of actual academic productivity we've had related to flexibility and training. But with that, Dr. Klingensmith, our Vice Chair of Surgical Education, thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited that you're here to get some information about our residency training program. And I would say when applicants ask me what's the one thing that really makes this program stand out, and I would say it's what we're talking about tonight, which is this concept of flexibility. We really pride ourselves and focus on allowing each trainee to obtain the training that he or she really wants. Obviously, we have to make sure we stay within RRC rules, and we have to make sure you're all eligible to sit for your boards. But beyond that, we provide enormous opportunities for a custom experience for each and every resident. The history of this is more than 15 years ago now. the combined boards for vascular surgery, general surgery, and CT surgery all started a conversation around allowing for an early specialization training program where a resident who wants to go into either vascular or CT surgery could start that during their general surgery residency. They could essentially start their fellowship a whole year early. We were really eager to jump on that bandwagon. We had leadership in both CT and vascular surgery that was really excited about it. I was the then general surgery program director, and Dr. Eberlein and I met. I told him I thought I could pull it off on the general surgery side. He was very encouraging. And so we have the earliest and longest experience with early specialization training in both CT and vascular surgery. We no longer have that training track in vascular surgery because we started an integrated training program here. We do have a flexibility track in vascular, and those of you who go in the vascular breakout room can ask some questions about that. But we continue to have a short track, as it's called, program in CT surgery here. And then based on the publications actually in the scholarly work that our residency program did to put forth the national experience in both CT and vascular surgery, the American Board of Surgery in 2011 decided that any specialty could be allowed to do some sort of flexibility training program where you could custom your experience in years 4 and 5 to basically prepare you for your career in whatever, whether it's colorectal surgery, breast surgery, surgical oncology, whatever you want it to be. And we were, not surprisingly, an early adopter of that. And we're continuing to lead a prospective 8-institution study looking at the impact of the flexibility track on residency outcomes and their outcomes when they get to fellowship and beyond. So you're coming to a place that is very rich in this in terms of its history. We believe very passionately about it. And through the breakout rooms tonight, you'll get to talk to both some of the residents who have been part of those tracks and benefited from those opportunities, but also from the faculty and get their perspectives. Whether it's about flexibility or not, you just want to know what the experience here might be in, say, trauma surgery or pediatric surgery. We have tremendous breadth and depth to our faculty and to our clinical offerings here. So welcome. We're looking forward to your questions. Dr. Eberlein and I will be staying in the so-called main room. If any of you don't go to a breakout room and you have questions for us, I'd be happy to answer those in any specifics. So look forward to chatting with all of you some more.
Thank you, Dr. Klingensmith. Appreciate that. And actually, the first fast tracker in transplant is with us tonight, Vijay Subramanian. So if you have an interest in transplant, he'll be in that breakout room as well. So with that, I want to introduce Dr. Eberlein, our illustrious chairman, and allow him to say a few words before we head into our first breakout session. Dr. Eberlein.
Yeah, I just wanted to add my welcome to everybody and say that the entire focus of our department is on the trainee. And I think that not only are we leaders in flexibility, but I think we have, over the 20-some years that I've been here, really developed trainees who actually are able to individualize their training. And I don't know that there are any two residents who come out with exactly the same training track. And I think one of the big aspects of that is that we allow our training to be flexible and allow for the trainee to tell us what it is that they would like to emphasize. Again, as Mary alluded, to make sure that you still are able to sit for your boards and et cetera. So, our whole focus is on the trainee. That's why all of us are here. We're very blessed in this department to have a faculty that is really committed to education, and that goes throughout all of residency, laboratory, as well as fellowships. So again, welcome. It's great to have all of you here, and Mary and I will be in the main room. and certainly be able to answer any questions that any of you might have.
Thanks, sir. So as I mentioned earlier, and for those of you who are coming in a little bit late, Kristen Donald, our program coordinator with whom you've been interacting, is going to start distributing everyone into the breakout rooms. And so we've got breakout rooms that are associated with acute and critical care surgery. We've got faculty and trainees who are in there, colorectal surgery, CT surgery, especially focusing on the early specialization, vascular surgery, and they'll also speak to the potential for early specialization, minimally invasive surgery, pediatric surgery, surgical oncology and HPB will be together, transplant, and there'll be a separate breakout room that I'll be in as well. So if anyone has any particular questions for me, and then as you heard, Dr. Klingensmith and Dr. Eberlein will be in the main room. So if you get your questions answered and you want to pop back into the main room, that's fine. So we'll have the brief time between the breakout rooms where we'll all be in the main room, be able to chat a little bit more, and then head back into the second round. So again, welcome. We're incredibly excited. We once again appreciate everyone taking their time this evening to join us, and we hope you find it an informative evening. If for some reason you don't get your questions answered, please feel free to email the asksurgery@whistle.edu, and we'll work on getting those questions answered for you, either on our webpage personally or on Twitter or Instagram. So Christel, I will let you start working on heading people into the various different rooms. So take a look down at the bottom of the screen if you don't get sent off immediately. And it may pop up the request to go to a breakout room, and you can just hit on that. And it'll take you there. So.
All right, I'm going to open the rooms. If you have chatted that you want to be led into a room, bear with me. I need to get through all of those, but see y'all in a bit.
All right. Hi, everybody. Looks like we have a nice mix of some residents, a bunch of applicants here. We can take your questions. I know some of you who maybe typed in the chat that you wanted Krista to send you somewhere, maybe magically disappearing from us, and that's just fine. So if you have questions for Dr. Eberlein and me, maybe that's the best place to start in case you get whisked away into a breakout room. So are there any questions? And don't be shy, because this is your chance.
Hi, I'd like to ask about the research training possible through taking 2 years off. I'm wondering what structures are in place to mentor residents interested in lab-based translational research, particularly residents with PhD backgrounds.
Great question. In the main room, when we're all together, we have an associate program director named Ryan Fields, and his sole purpose for being, I like to say, is to help mentor all of you residents into what your research opportunity would be. Ryan actually trained here, went to Memorial, did a surgical oncology fellowship, and we recruited him back here. He's been on faculty, I want to say about 10 years. He himself is an NIH-funded investigator, and he helps all of the residents, when they are interns, start the conversation about what research opportunities you'd like to pursue. He connects you to PIs, has you go basically sort of shop around to labs and figure out what you'd like to do. Most of our residents do 2 years between years, clinical years 2 and 3, but there's flexibility as to how many years you do, and there's flexibility as to whether you go out after the 2nd year or the 3rd year. Does that answer your question, Philip?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. And we're going to have a whole session on that next time. I think it's September 24th when we had our next session. We'll be talking a lot more in depth about the research opportunities.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Anyone else?
I'll just add that we have 140 peer-reviewed grants in the Department of Surgery by our faculty, and they cover every division and section in the Department of Surgery, including our Division of Public Health Science. And so those of you that are interested in doing outcomes and population health, that is also an opportunity. And we also have a master's in population health science, which a number of our residents have taken advantage of. It's about a year, pretty much full time if you want to do that. But a lot of our trainees who are on T32s will also do that in the period of time that they're working in the lab.
Are there any questions about the flexibility track? I would guess that this is something that sounds a little unusual to you, although maybe more and more residency programs are getting used to the concept. If you've attended some of these other info sessions or looked at their websites, maybe this is not all that foreign to you.
I had a question about it. So I was wondering if you could speak more, if the residents could speak more about how they feel this has prepared them or made them more competitive applicants for fellowships afterwards.
So the only person I see in the room, and now she's gone, there was an intern in this room. I don't see any other residents in this room. I think they've all been pulled into some of the specialty rooms. I will tell you from the 15 years we've been doing this is that the reports from the people who get an opportunity to participate in either the ESP tracks, which are CT and vascular, or the flexible track, because they have many more months on those specialties, they develop very close mentor-mentee relationships with the faculty in those areas, more so than you could get on, say, a 2-month rotation on HPB. You do 6 months on HPB. So you understand and get to know those people better. But more importantly, you've done so many cases with them. They know exactly what your skill set is, and you advance much more quickly in terms of amassing your technical and clinical skills. And so it's not at all unheard of for a 4th-year resident or a chief, but a 4th-year resident to get to do the vast majority of a Whipple just because they know that person's abilities. And so one of our very first ESP residents, who's now one of our faculty members in cardiac surgery, was convinced. He finished the CT program here, so did the blended early specialization training program. And his first job out of training was at UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham. And as a new faculty member doing open heart surgery, kind of high risk stuff, a little scary. And he was hired on at the same time as someone who had done the traditional track. This is Spencer Melby that I'm talking about, if you want to talk to him later. He was convinced that his ability to take on difficult cases was absolutely aided by the fact that he'd had a full additional 12 months on task compared to his peer who was hired at the same time. So not only had he done more cases, he just felt much more comfortable in his own ability. He'd seen a lot more, but he'd also been given a lot of autonomy and training because of the way his training was structured. And we were lucky to recruit him back, but he is a huge proponent of this track, especially in CT surgery, because of his own personal experience with it. And it makes sense, right? That, more time on task, of course, you're going to be more confident. But we've got some survey data to prove it. We have published on this a couple different things, but really the proof is in the pudding, right? It's in how well you as a person feel, and obviously what your patient outcomes are. We don't yet have that data. I would love to figure out a way to study that. Good question.
That sounds great, thank you.
Sometimes we get questions about when the whole flex track thing happens. So like, do you match into it? No, you don't match into it. Everybody matches as a surgical intern, and it's not until your 3rd clinical year that we start having you think about what that differentiation looks like for you. And the reason that we time it that way is a lot of people need some time to understand what it really means to be a vascular surgeon and not just what you've experienced as a medical student, to really know for sure if, for example, vascular is what you want to do. So you've had an opportunity to rotate through the junior level rotations, and by the time you're a 3rd-year resident, you generally have a pretty clear idea of what specialty you want to focus on. You then actually make a formal proposal, a written proposal. We have a templated form that you use. You make a written proposal to Dr. Wise. We have to examine your case logs to date and make sure that with the rotations you're proposing, you will meet the case minimums you need to sit for your boards. And then depending on the specialty, you would also have a formal interview process with the faculty in that specialty to make sure that they like your plan and want to accept you in. And in the case of the CTESP, they do not go through the match for the position that you would occupy. And so they have to formally interview you and agree. In the case of the other specialties, it's not a guarantee that you stay in that fellowship necessarily, although we do have one who went through the transplant track here and was guaranteed a match spot in their fellowship. So those are a little bit in evolution. The transplant and surgical critical care and all of those, we're starting lots of conversations about that, colorectal surgery as well. So that's sort of how it all works.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
My name is Kurt. I'm from the University of Massachusetts. Thanks for this webinar. So I don't know if you call it FIST. Is that the shorthand for it, or do you call it?
Flexibility in Surgical Training, FIST, correct.
Do you colloquially refer to it as FIST? Is that how it works? Just you say the whole.
That's what we call it at our residency program. If you look on the ABS, American Board of Surgery website, there is mention of that too. And it's mainly because we're the program and we're the lead site for the multi-institutional study that's informing a lot of the board's work. And so they picked up what we call it.
Yes, yeah, I saw their abbreviation on the website. All right. Well, it sounds great. So it seems natural that if you're working with these academic surgeons at WashU, that in addition to a clinical component, is there a research component to this? Like, do mentees tend to do not only work in the OR with their mentors, also do research? And my other question was, do you ever run into a case where there's a class that all wants to do one specialty, like surgical oncology? Is there a cap? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. So I'll take your first question first. So with regard to the research, if you're talking about dedicated research, that would be done generally between years 2 and 3, and very commonly, yes. So a person who wants to do transplant has done transplant research for 2 years before they become a clinical 3. And then of course there's ample opportunities while you're a clinical resident to be mostly doing clinical research projects. And most of the residents who are in this track end up doing some sort of clinical research project, in part to prepare themselves for their career, but also to make sure they're competitive for whatever fellowship they're matching in. So those opportunities are abundant. With regard to how do we juggle, how do we make the puzzle work? That's a great question, and we don't have a cap. We have to be realistic though about how many opportunities there are. And so we have not yet had it happen, knock wood, but if we for some reason had 6 out of 8 residents that wanted to do surgical oncology, we would have to figure out what that looks like and how we would be able to get everybody at least a portion of what they want. Now, there aren't enough months in the year to get everybody their full 12 months over years 4 and 5. So we'd have to figure that out. But so far, it's worked really well. And I think one of the reasons it's worked so well is that we are really strong across the whole breadth of specialties here. And people just kind of sort themselves out. Like, we get a lot of people interested in CT, but at the same time, a lot interested in transplant and ped surgery. And it's just, so far, it's worked. So.
And Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, I think one of the real strengths here is that we do flexibility across the board. And so that's, in a lot of programs, they'll do it in MIS or they'll do it in surgical oncology. And so it makes it much more difficult, because if you're only going to do one flexibility track, then, if 2 people want to do it, it makes it very, very difficult. Here, we're able to mix and match. And I think the other big thing is that our programs are so big and the wealth of clinical material is so great that it really allows us a little bit of flexibility. But Paul, when he presents when we had traditional interviews, he always presents the actual schedule of the residents in our program. and it looks like a genetic heat map. And the reason is that there literally is no two residents in the entire program that have the same schedule. So both Mary and I, when we were training, you sort of went through in lockstep, and you'd start out on trauma, and then you go to critical care, and then you go to colorectal, and then you go to something else. And here, it's a complete hodgepodge in order to make that work. And actually, the secret sauce is the two administrative chief residents actually make out a large part of the schedule. And you know, it's a great learning experience for them to deal with all of their colleagues who, you know, two people want to do colorectal and nobody wants to do surg-onc, and three people want to do MIS, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, balancing those needs is a great training exercise for our administrative chiefs.
For sure. I see a question in the chat. I wonder if I can just address it. The question is, what are the chances of an international medical graduate matching into the early specialization training program for CT surgery? So I would say that if you match into this residency program as an intern and you are a competent resident and you prove your worth, you will be slotted into that program. You know, if you're up to snuff, you're in. So you know, the big hurdle is just getting into the residency program. I hope that makes sense, but you know, there's a relatively small pool of residents, only 8 per year, that you're competing against, as opposed to the whole universe of people competing to match into the fellowship. So it's a nice kind of way to get into the CT program here at WashU, which is an amazing program for those of you who are interested in CT surgery. Hopefully you're aware that we have world-class experiences in lung transplant surgery and cardiac surgery, cardiac assist devices, all of that stuff. All right, looks like everyone's coming back from the breakout rooms, so welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
You're making your way. Oh, it's the ACCS crew. Hi, guys. Some of you are on beaches. Some of you look like you're still in your office. Dr. Mazuski.
I just got done with attending in the SICU.
All right. A few epic documentation things to do, eh?
We're not allowed to use swear words during this particular session.
Got it. Got it. All right. Awesome.
Welcome back, everybody. So hopefully that was enough time to be able to have some great interactions. And Dr. Klingsmith, did you have a number of people in the main room to challenge you and Dr. Eberlein?
We had a fabulous time. Thank you for that. Yes, we had some great questions, good discussion. Yep. Good.
Well, so for those of you who didn't hear, Krista is going to work on kind of reassigning the second level of the breakout rooms. And so we're going to kind of make that transition. One of the great questions I got from one of the applicants was about our kind of mentorship system. And so the residents designated that a mentorship family. I mentioned that in the introduction, but when you get, when you match here, we assign you up with some big civs, essentially, you know, second years all the way up to chief residents, as well as a faculty member, as well as an associate program director. And all of them can kind of start those, start you allow to be able to kind of put your roots down and get some mentorship interactions. Then as you start to interact with faculty and other individuals within the program, you're going to start to develop kind of what I call true mentors, because I find forced mentorship is really difficult to be able to make that work. But as you organically start to interact with folks and meet folks and individuals who you really can bond with and create that collaborative relationship that's required with mentorship, Then as you go into the lab and your professional development, that's when you really get the deeper relationships that'll help you go on to the next stage. And so I find that's a great system. It allows things to happen a little bit more easily. And even within the professional development time, if you decide you want to change directions, or if during your training you decide you want to change directions, I have found that the faculty here have been incredibly supportive of that, recognizing that a lot of our residents will make changes during their residency, right? So you come in thinking you want to do trauma and you end up doing colorectal, or you think you're going to do HPB and you do something else. So that's the great thing about being in a place like this, where the depth and breadth is so incredible that the safety net and the choices you can have are almost limitless. Let's see if there are any other. Great. Dr. Klinsmith, were there any other comments, or Dr. Eberlein, any other things, questions that came up that you wanted to chat about while we wait for the transition into the next?
I did describe for the group in the main room how the flexibility track works in terms of the timing, and I clarified that you don't match into your track, that it's not until your third clinical year that you express your interest, and depending on the specialty, there's can be sort of an interview process. And I use the example of CT surgery because they don't go through the match that year for the spot you'll occupy. They actually formally interview you before they accept you in. But anyway, because you don't make that decision until your third clinical year, you've had ample time to explore your options and rotate through all of the services and get a real sense for what it's like to actually do these specialties as an MD. Many of you don't yet know what that's like. You know what it's like as a student, but you don't really know what it's like to be the person responsible for the patient. So it's worked out really well in terms of the way we can sequence the timing.
Great. I'm going to see, Krista, what do you let us know about the next stages here and what you need from us?
I'm going to need about 5 minutes. So.
Okay, perfect. Dr. Eberlein, any other comments or any questions that came up?
One thing I mentioned in the cardiothoracic breakout room.
Oh, yeah.
There was no, there's no a priori quota of the number of people per year that would be in any subspecialty. And we've shown a lot of ability to overcome overcrowding in some years when too many people wanted to do one particular specialty, to kind of spread that out. And that could be either with, some people not doing lab time if they've had some advanced degree experience beforehand, or for some people who are really having a productive time, they might spend more than the usual 2 to spend 3 or sometimes even more. And that will often break a logjam if it seems like there are too many people that are interested in one particular subspecialty and there are not enough fellowship slots available for that particular year.
Dr. Myers is our chief of thoracic surgery, and I'm glad he brought that up because, so this, I'm holding this up. This is my Velcro draft board, and I have one of these for every year for the next 5 years. And you can see when the interns start off, they're the same color, but then as they shift through, the colors start to mix. And so by the time you get to the chief year, you see some people who have done no time in the lab, some people have done 3 years in the lab, and you end up with a mix. And I think what Dr. Myers is bringing up is that one of the great things about this place is we have such a huge variety of interest in the residents that usually I kind of think of the flexibilities like trading cards. And so I'll trade you your HPV for ped surgery or colorectal for ACCS or whatever, but being able to kind of shift things. And we have such a variety of interests that it seems to work out almost every year. But when there are times when it seems like, well, maybe we're going to have more CT folks this year than we have slots for, that we are able to make some adjustments with lab time and other things. Again, flexibility, not just in your training experience, but whether you go into the lab, when you go into the lab, how long you stay in the lab, and other aspects that really allow us to be able to get very creative with the training experience. It really helps tremendously. So, and this is what keeps me sane, because otherwise I can't track what everybody's going to do and when they're going to do it. So put it back to its designated slot.
I think one of the nice things is that, knock on wood, everybody so far in the years that we've been here has been able to do exactly what they want to do. So, which is a, complete 180 degrees from the way it used to be. And so I think, Mary has put the infrastructure, and Mike Awad and then Paul have followed in that stead, and so it's worked out very well. But it helps to have a big program, and it helps to have flexibility of all of the faculty divisions and sections.
And the flexibility is just that. I think there is no cookie cutter. It's not, if you want to do pediatric surgery, you have to do this, 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 and this. Or if you want to do colorectal, you have to do this, this for the particular periods of time. It truly is individualized. So if you're interested in colorectal surgery, for example, and you want to spend a little bit extra time on MIS, a little extra time on surgical oncology or HPB, maybe you want to do an endoscopy rotation even as a chief resident and spend a little bit extra time doing endoscopy, or you want to do some radiology time, maybe even want to do like a couple weeks in interventional radiology. I mean, our patients never have complications and they never need drains placed ever. But if that were to be the case, maybe you'd want to have some experience and exposure to that. So again, in hypotheticals, of course. But in reality, that allows you to be able to kind of step in. And we've had a number of folks who are doing CT who spend time, doing echo and interventional cardiology and interventional pulmonology and other things that really allow them to be able to experience what they want to experience. So it's not regimented every single time for everybody.
Hey, Paul, there's a good question in the chat line from Melanie Fritz, who asked what % of residents choose to take advantage of flexibility in surgical training in general. I would have said 100% use the flexibility in some way or another. But maybe you guys have a hard number for that.
So the links that I put in there actually looked at the actual statistics of the number of residents who do that, but greater than 90% of our residents end up doing it. And Dr. Hawkins is our chief of HPB, and he's absolutely right. I would say probably almost 100% of our residents do something related to flexibility, that they will try some aspect of it. It may not be huge changes to their training. Certainly just the baseline training is exceptional here. And so our kind of foundational training is really all you need. And we do have a number of folks who have gone into community practice and who have done other things and not necessarily focused on the flexibility aspects of it. But it's something that a lot of the individuals who come here are looking for that. They're looking for that ability to be able to control their training experience. And so doing the flexibility gives you that. And I will say it's a pain in the butt, a pain in the butt from the administrative standpoint. It's a lot of work for us to make it work. I mean, this is a very complex puzzle that we tear it down and build it up every year. And then all of a sudden somebody says, you know what, Dr. Wise, I want an extra year in the lab, or I want to come out early, or I want to do something different, or hey, I've been thinking about this. And I love that. It makes my job hard, but it makes it a lot of fun because it's never boring. There's always something that's coming up that we're able to change. And this board always seems to work out. That it always, every year, when I need somebody to stay another year in the lab, someone will come to me and say, Dr. Wise, I'm thinking about one more year in the lab. Perfect.
So,
do it.
Dr. Wise's first year as the program director, his hair was actually a little longer than Mary's.
Right.
He has pulled it all out trying to make the puzzle work.
But that's what makes it fun, right? Totally. So.
But so far, I mean, everybody's gotten to, fit into the puzzle, so it's worked out.
Yep, without a doubt. So anyone else want to put a question in the chat, feel free while we're waiting to shift over. I know with 115 people here, it's taken a little bit of work for Krista to be able to shuffle everybody. So yeah. We have a few other people who have had follicular issues, there's no doubt.
This is Ryan Fields. I'm the head of surgical oncology and also the director of the resident research sort of experience. And I just put a quick plug in a few weeks from now. Actually, I think it's September 24th. We'll have a separate one of these that's really sort of dedicated towards the research opportunities. But the theme and overall sort of message I'd give you is it's the same sort of flexibility that we have in the clinical side, we have on the research side, to be able to allow people to pivot interests if that happens, but also to be able to really find mentors across any research opportunity. You could really imagine there's probably somebody here who's interested in it, or somebody here who's interested in it and has a colleague somewhere else who can really set you up for world-class opportunities that then sometimes do give Paul and I headaches, as he had alluded to, because people want to do more or less time in the lab. But we're really fortunate to have the support of the department and such a broad and large program to be able to allow people to mix and match and come out early and stay longer and do all the things they want to do.
Paul and Mary, have you ever tracked how often people have major changes in what their goals are from, like, say, first year to graduation? Is that more common than not, or do most people seem to have a pretty good sense of what they're going to do and then they stick to it?
So I would say, I'll go first, Paul. It's totally anecdotal, Brian, but I would say 20% of people stick with what they said they were going to do when they show up as interns, meaning that 80% of people do something different. Sometimes it's radically different, but a lot of times it's, you know, I thought I was going to do vascular or CT, and they lean more towards vascular or whatever. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I at least 50% change. And we do have a number of people who come here who are undifferentiated, right? They're not really sure. They've had a relatively limited exposure in medical school and they're still not sure. So if we count them also in the change, I would agree it's around 80% who end up shifting without a doubt. So yeah, that's, and Dr. Awad is one of our associate program directors and the director of our sim lab. Mentioned the fact that on average residents change their mind 3 times. So, and actually, Mike, if you don't mind coming on, because there's one of the questions that came up in the chat was about the robotics curriculum, and Dr. Awad has worked really hard in setting that up within the simulation lab, and we've got great simulation opportunities there. So, Mike, you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, sure, Paul. Thank you. You know, so we want our residents to really be active participants in our robotics cases, not like when I was a resident, robotics was new and I was the bedside assistant, just kind of getting knocked around by the robot arms at the bedside. We want our residents to be sitting at the console, active participants, and that happens from year 1. And the way we're able to facilitate that is by having a full robotics curriculum. And so that begins in your first year. We get you down to the simulation center. We're very fortunate in that we're one of the few centers in the country that has a full-fledged robotic system, not just the backpack simulator, but the whole robot in the simulation center. So we have you go through a formal curriculum that gets you through all the nuts and bolts and the pedals and switches. There are virtual reality modules that we have you go through, and we track your progress through them. And once you complete that, that's kind of your ticket to ride. And that allows you to sit at the surgeon's console in the operating room and go at it. And so no longer are we worried about having to teach you that in the operating room. We get all that out of the way in the sim center. And then when you come to the operating room, you're ready and prepared. So just 2 weeks ago, I had one of our brand new interns sitting at the second console. And we have dual consoles for all our systems. Brand new intern, 2 months into internship, doing a robotic paraesophageal hernia with me. And she did great. And so we have kind of a graded level of progression after we focus on basic skills in the intern year. Then we progress on to kind of more complex procedures. We have the ability to do wet labs in the sim center. So we did a robotic colectomy lab this past fall, and we're gearing up for a robotic foregut lab this coming academic year. So there's a formal curriculum that everybody gets plugged into so that you can be competent at the robot from the first year of your residency.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. So Krista informs me that she is ready. So we'll do 10 minutes for this one, just given the hour, because we want to make sure that the residents have an opportunity to be able to chat with the applicants. So Krista, whenever you're ready, fire away.
All right. I should say welcome, but you're already here. So hi, everybody. Welcome. Dr. Eberlein and I would be pleased to answer some questions. We do have this time, I see at least 2 residents who are here. So we do have some residents who can answer questions too. Last time we were in the big room, we had lost all of our residents to breakout rooms. So don't be shy. Now's your chance to ask us questions. If you don't, yep, go ahead. I see a hand went up. Go for it.
Hi.
Please.
Thanks for doing this. It's really a pleasure to be part of this, and it's really an odd match season, and this kind of events do a lot for us. So I'm an IMG right now, and I'm applying to a preliminary position in surgery, and I'm aiming towards getting into neurosurgery in the future. And I wanted to know a little bit about the possibilities of maybe having some exposure to that branch of surgery. And I know it's not ACS or colorectal or vascular or CT, and it's a beast of its own, but I know WashU has a great neurosurgery program, and maybe you have some connection or something of the sort that might be beneficial for somebody like me. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I will say that we've not had anybody to date who has asked for that sort of accommodation. That said, I see no reason why we couldn't have that conversation with our neurosurgery colleagues. They're a separate department here. As you know, world-renowned, Dr. Eberlein has been a chair here for a number of years and has great relationships with all of his peer chairs. I've got great relationships with sort of the peer surgical educators in that department. So it would be an easy conversation for us to have. I would have to figure out what the logistics of that might look like and what rotations they might have available to you, and how we could make the horse trade work, so to speak. But I see no reason why we couldn't entertain that possibility. We do have a number of so-called undesignated preliminary positions, usually about 4 intern positions. And so that's a definite possibility. And we would be pleased to talk to you about that more specifically when you're interviewing for a prelim position. And we can even do some investigation, so we'd have more information for you specifically.
Great. Thank you so much. Actually,
sure. Anyone else? Please ask your questions. Yes, Amir.
Hi, thank you for arranging this. My question is, for residents who intend on taking a research year or plan to do an additional degree, is there like secured funding for these residents, or is there an onus on the residents to apply for grants and get funding through that?
Yeah, great question. So we have 3 T32 training track grants, which is more positions than we usually need. So we usually have residents from other institutions that come in and take some of those positions on our training grants. We do, however, require that every resident applies for grant funding. And the reason for that is that we actually studied this some years ago, and we found that residents who had independent funding for their research when they were residents were more likely to become independently funded investigators when they're attendings. And so there's no secret that grantsmanship is a set of skills that it takes a long time to learn, and we really want to start you when you're a resident in that process. Now, of course, you're not going to be able to write a T32 or an R32 grant, but we will mentor you through that, and your PI works with you to help you assemble a grant. Whether it's an NIH grant or one of the foundation grants or a grant for one of the other surgical societies, we do ask that everybody apply for funding. Now, do they all get it? No, but those that do are on a trajectory to have some great success later in their careers. Did that answer everything you asked? Go ahead, Dr. Blunt.
I'll just add that, you know, I used to have a bias both in my lab and when I first came, that residents should not write grants. And it was actually when we prospectively looked at the data and we found that, gee, those that wrote grants actually did better, both in their productivity in the lab, but also in the future of doing research. And so even old dogs will learn new tricks. So it was, again, it was driven by data. And I think that's been something that when we've studied flexibility, when we've looked at the simulation, our curriculum, et cetera, we've all used data to drive the decision making that we do. So it's very unique.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, I have a question. I'm Ashley Troy. I'm at Duke. Just a follow-up question to that. So T32, as I understand it, is a training grant. And is that specialty specific, or is that just kind of everyone in the general surgery program is eligible to be tapped into that?
Dr. Eberlein, you want to address?
Yeah, so everybody is technically eligible. We have 3, one in CT, one in trauma critical care, and then another in surgical oncology. Some years ago, the surgical oncology, we actually divided into 2 tracks. So track 1 is a basic science, wet laboratory experience. And the other is a population health science, outcomes, prospective trial track. And so, and not infrequently, people will get a master's in population health science, whether they're in the basic science or the population health track. And so, you know, the latter track sort of emphasizes the statistical modeling and the powering of studies. So we're not big proponents of people doing observational database queries. We're actually using that as preliminary data to then develop prospective interventions that are properly powered and with this proper statistical methodology to actually answer a question, no different than you might do if you were doing a scientific experiment in a wet laboratory.
Does that answer your question, Ashley? So you know, we have a fairly broad range. I will say we've had some people, you know, wanting to be, say, a pediatric surgeon who works in the pediatric surgery lab, but they're doing an oncology project, so they can actually be on the oncology T32, but they're working with a pediatric surgeon. So there's all sorts of ways that we can be somewhat creative, but also true to the requirements of the training grant.
On the other hand, you know, to use that specific example where we've had, you know, because Brad Warner generally has a couple of R01s, et cetera, and he's been very popular in terms of trainees wanting to work.
Pediatric surgeon.
He's the chief of pediatric surgery and surgeon in chief at Children's. And, but there's an example where if the person is not going to be working on a project that is, for example, cancer focused, well, then we'll go ahead and allow the person to write grants. And we have several aspects where they'll be able to get the funding through another source. So it works out pretty well.
Thank you both.
Looks like our breakout friends are coming back. Any other questions while we're waiting for everyone to assemble from you guys? Yes, Stephanie.
Sure, Stephanie.
Thank you for this. I had a question about those residents who are maybe not quite undifferentiated, but are still thinking about multiple specialties, and whether there's any flexibility in terms of helping them pick during first 2 years before they go out. I think probably specifically a little bit more with the people who are interested in CT, because those tend to be a little bit less covered during the first 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. You're my favorite kind of person, because I love that we get a person who comes here and can really, with an open mind, experience every rotation that we have. And when I say we're renowned for our breadth and depth, I really mean that. You will get to work elbow to elbow with some of the leaders in all of the specialties in American surgery, so that you can make the best decision for yourself about what you want to do. You do get a fair amount of time on CT surgery as a junior resident here. That's partly because we have an incredible CT surgery program. They really want to showcase what they have for junior residents. They're a big, busy program and they need the help. So you would get some experience on CT surgery, unlike some residency programs where you get zero experience on CT surgery as a junior resident. But for sure, yes, there's opportunities both in and out of the formal rotation structure to get to know those faculty, get to understand that specialty. There's after hours learning sessions, there's social events, all sorts of things that will give you additional ways to understand the specialty and the people here who are practicing that specialty.
Welcome back, everybody. Dr. Klingsmith, thanks for finishing up the question there. So the faculty, I want to thank all the faculty and all the alumni and everyone who's come back. I definitely want to thank the applicants as well, but it's been so much fun. It's kind of like a little mini reunion for us to see all these familiar faces. And we obviously don't get to see each other very much in general, but especially this year with meetings being canceled, et cetera. So it's been really fun to see a lot of faces virtually. So I want to thank all of them for joining us and taking time out of their evenings. I want to thank the applicants as well. So we're going to leave. We're going to turn off the recording. The faculty are going to leave.